board meeting to order for the good of the room. Actually, there's a couple of different faces that are not ordinary. The calendar year has changed, so we'll do some introductions going around the room here. But I believe a sign-up sheet is being circulated for those present. But I do want to address the people that are attending online. And if I could, I'll just do like a roll call to make sure that you can hear. So first, Catherine, Tim, can you hear me and are you present? Or maybe in reverse?
Yes, I can hear you and I am present.
All right, Catherine, and then Corey Camp.
Yep. Hey, Brad. I am here and I can hear you guys.
All right, that's Corey Camp, is the finance director for Anoka County, who also does the budgeting for the Joint Law Enforcement Council. My name is Brad Wise. I'm, at least for now, the chair of the governance committee. And I'll just tell you that I've made Mr. Palumbo, who is chair of the Joint Law Enforcement Council, aware that I plan to retire from Coon Rapids in in June of 2022, here coming up in 6 months, so that it would seem appropriate to have somebody serve as governance committee chair who would be able to continue beyond that time period, which would be basically 2 more meetings. And I'm sure, Tony, you're going to be prepared to discuss that topic at some point during today's meeting?
I can.
All right, that would be great. So anyway, I'm Brad Wise again, Coon Rapids Police, and we'll just do introductions around the room. So let's go to my left. So it's my left.
Okay, I'm Sheila Larson, and I replaced Dave Paschal as commander in the jail division.
I'm Doreen Borntrigger, and I work for Attorney Colombo.
My name is George Jensen. I'm the Public Safety Data System Manager.
I'm Jason Nyhart. I'm the Public Safety Data System Fire RMS Manager.
Brenna Maddox, Public Safety Data System Law RMS.
Josh Antoine, Spring Lake Park Chief Police.
Val Sprinsanatic, Director of Emergency Communications.
Dee Goodman, Anoka County. Susan Freeland, Anoka County IT.
Scott Schulte, County Commissioner.
And Tony Palumbo, the County Attorney.
All right, very good. All right, so we'll get to know each other a little bit more over time. Oh, we have one more person to do an introduction of himself. Your timing is perfect. Yeah.
Chief Jeff Caters, Ramsey.
Jeff Caters with Ramsey. All right, so we do have a quorum, and so we can attend to our business for the governance committee. The agenda has been routed, and I believe the minutes have also been routed. And I think the first order of business is approval of the meeting.
I'll move.
Who said that?
I did.
Second, Schulte.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the minutes? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, next. On to subcommittee reports, budget committee, and again, it's for project status. It refers to me that project status is the overall project which began in 2013. This is basically that placeholder sentence until there is final system acceptance by the Joint Law Enforcement Council from Central Squared, our vendor for the public safety data system. That final system acceptance has not taken place, and the placeholder on this is probably 3 or 4 years. And always is my annual tradition to say it works to our advantage to have it not have the final system acceptance. It's not a detriment to the overall project that status still exists. So if anybody has any detailed questions about the project itself, how it got to this point, I'd welcome any questions. I can take them offline too. If somebody wants to have that conversation out there, more than welcome to. But that said, the project status is that we have like one nominal little project. Was it NIBRS, George, or something like that?
Yeah, it's NCIC queries and FBR, or the field-based reporting system.
And once that project is checked off for a Central Square, and it's a small project, right? $50,000 roughly project.
Well, it's already part of the deal. But what it does is once we complete that part of the project, we will then be able to pay the final amount, whatever we owe minus credits.
All right. So it's not a bad thing. So just move on then from the project status and move on to the financial status report. Corey.
All right. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Chief. And what I'm going to start with first is you should have the 2021 budget to actual, kind of our estimated how we came in for 2021. So if you pull, I think that was added to your packet that Doreen sent out. So if you take a look at that, we basically, obviously our dues is 1.518 million. We collected all our dues from everybody last year, so we were 100% there. We had budgeted 1,684,700 total. We are expecting to spend 1,504,179. That's our estimate. When we got the bills, we might be off a little bit. Obviously, we have another month before we get all the bills in and we can finalize the year end. But we had initially budgeted to use $165,981 in fund balance. We are expecting to actually have a surplus of 14,540, so we're about 180,000 to the good from what we had expected. Mainly due to, I guess, if you look at our travel is down, considerably due to the pandemic, the travel and training. We expect that could come back, but that's only about 30,000. We were also favorable on our TriTech support contract. We were able to adjust that budget down going into 2022 for the 2022 budget. So anyway, overall we're coming in favorable. So I don't know if there's any other questions, or George, do you want to add any more context around that?
No, that's all seems reasonable. At Central Square, just so as far as the licensing goes, because of the setup that Logis has provided us in 2018 when we rebuilt the system, we went to a backup where they're backing up our systems pretty constantly, about every 11 hours. What that allowed us, that cost us about $50,000 a year, but we were able, because of that, we were able to wipe out about $67,000 worth of licenses in the Central Square side. That's why we came up so far ahead on that particular item.
All right, thank you, Corey. I'm gonna add one comment regarding the financial status report. Is that just for the good of the room? Is that you saw that we have a fund balance. We had a fund balance on January 1st of $754,159. We don't want to have a fund balance that's that large. And our plan had been at the beginning of the year to reduce that fund balance by $165,000. Basically, that's overpayment of dues, and the only reasonable way we could figure to eliminate that fund balance was to spend it on the activities of the Joint Law Enforcement Council. That said, despite our efforts to reduce the fund balance actually grew in 2021, which was one not expected. That said, is that while it's not a topic of conversation for this particular group, the governance committee, but the overall Joint Law Enforcement Council is in discussions these days to talk about civil unrest and the need to prepare to perhaps defend government buildings from civil unrest. Specifically, we're talking about Jersey barriers and fencing and those sorts of things. So just for the good of this group is that actually it'll be me, again, that'll be making a presentation to the Joint Law Enforcement Council in 2 weeks regarding what expenses could possibly be related to planning and moving forward to try to protect government buildings in Anoka County. So while our plan wasn't to let the fund balance grow, that it actually exists might turn out to be useful in a way that we didn't really foresee 3 years ago when we made the commitment to try to reduce that fund balance. I think, Corey, do you remember, was it 20? Well, we had a percentage in mind. Was it 25% or something?
It was 20%, Brad. And keep in mind that, we forecast using it over 5 years, and part of that is by keeping our dues down. So if there were to be additional expenditures added, you are probably looking at having to raise the dues. Remember, we didn't really raise the dues last year to everybody, and going into 23, you're going to see a proposal of holding it at 0 as well. So, but that's further discussion, because if there's a need that comes up, obviously the Joint Law Enforcement Committee can talk about that as well.
Again, Mr. Chair, just to clarify for some of our new members, when he talks about a budget, we're talking about a surplus into a fund. And our goal was to have 20% of operations in this fund as kind of an emergency, so to speak. And that's what Corey's talking about, which is that's 154,000. That is money that's in our reserve fund. And what we're trying to do as a goal is get that to about 20% of our operations. And that's pretty much standard in the industry, isn't it, Corey? In terms of accounting, you want to have at least that much of a fund reserve.
Yeah, Mr. Palumbo, we want to have some kind of reserve. The reserve you have might depend on the type of organization you are. Most counties and cities are recommended to have 35% of their general operations, but due to the nature of ours, we're using the assumption of 20% as being that would be well and enough to meet our operating needs. So.
Sure, just thought I'd clarify that for the new members.
All right, sounds good. All right, so that was what, 2021. Now you,
Right.
Corey, you ready to move on?
Yeah, I'm ready to move on. If you look at your other sheet, is our proposed or our preliminary 2023. This is our initial proposed. This will probably adjust slightly. George and I have met. We're waiting on some more information, but like last year, we did show this. We did not really adjust it a lot. There was, there might be some shifting on a few of the line items, but we're assuming basically a flat, fee or dues for everybody. Due to the percentages, if you look at the 2023 proposed on the revenue side, it does show that the law would actually see a 2% reduction, and you'd see a 1.41% increase in the county in CAD and about 0.5%, 0.5% for fire. And that's due to just the spread of the costs over the super formula, which is, law pays a certain percent. The county pays a certain percent. That's the 31.31 for law, 60.58% for CAD, and fire pays 8.11%. But there are some expenses that are paid fully by one or the other due to their nature. And with that spread and the shift of some of the, costs, you might see a slight shift, because if you look at 22 adopted, the county saw a 1.59% decrease, fire saw a 2.5%, and police saw an average 1.59% increase. So it's all going to vary, based on that formula. So that's where overall it's a 0%, but it's not, but it will shift among each the dues based on the way it's spread on the formula. If we look at the expenditures for 2023, overall, our current request or preliminary thought is that it would increase by 1.4% to about 1,645,680. We would plan to use 122,654 of the reserves, and we usually do plan to do that. If we didn't use that in reserves, we would have to raise the dues. And so this allows us to keep it at a 0%. Overall, our increases are, right now we're looking at on administrative support, we're seeing a decrease, and that's mainly due to the Wyman contract ending. There was $15,000 that had been used in there. And George, I don't know if you want to talk about that contract at all.
Yeah, so the Wyman LLC contract is Jolene Wyman, former records admin for the city of Ramsey, is also an expert with the legacy RMS system, and she started an LLC to help us maintain that data. It'll go on for the rest of 2022, and then we'll end that contract with her. And then, so at that point in time, the data will get dumped into the browser, and then any adjustments to that will have to be done manually through my office.
Right. So that's the main shift in the administrative support. Everything else is staying pretty even, pretty flat. And then if you look at the system maintenance and support, we have a just under 3% change. There are some software licensing costs that we're expecting to go up, mainly around LexisNexis, if I recall. So, and the other contracts are looking at more of a 3%. Anything you want to add in there, George?
So LexisNexis is Akron Virtual Crime Center. It's a very popular program with our law enforcement community. It allows them access not only to the data that's in our system, but data from all the other agencies around us, if they're participating, and everybody is, as far as I can tell. So, and this allows them to do searches and connect people to other crimes all throughout the area. That will be renegotiated. That contract comes up for renegotiation. I believe it's March of 2023. So we'll start working on that probably October timeframe to present to the jailer.
Right. So again, overall, we're expecting a very minimal change or increase to our bottom line operating costs, and therefore that would allow us to maintain that no change to our dues. Are there any questions?
One comment, Mr. Chair, just as chair of the joint law, for the newer members, we introduced, the new budget. Corey usually just does it this meeting to begin with in January. Then we discussed it at January joint law. We discussed it again at the April if there's any modifications, and then the joint law then passes it in July. So those city members, you're going to be affected. Obviously, your local departments will be affected by what's on here, but you will have an opportunity to have a look at this at least twice before you have to vote on it. So I want to pass that along to the newer members.
All right, excellent. Anybody else have any questions related to the budget? All right, Corey, thank you very much.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Yep. All right, next item is data standards chief Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Data Standards Committee met yesterday at Ramsey PD. We had 3 items on our agenda. I'll summarize those issues that we made a recommendation on to the joint law. The first one was the use of outside emails like Gmail, Yahoo, or should we require that it only be department issued emails? And that is what the committee came up with, that it should be department issued emails. Have some concerns about some third-party providers as far as email and security. So that'll be our recommendation for the joint law group. The second item was we discussed and we went down the path of discussing gender identity and how it impacts, do we have a business need to collect some of that information? The group will make a recommendation that if following similar to what the jail does with classifying people based on their biological assignment, but also creating an alias file for if they identify differently than that biological. And we tried to determine the business need for that. We had some lengthy discussions about that. So, we will make a recommendation to the joint law, or I will make a recommendation to the joint law that we do that with accepting the alias file of those records. And then the third thing was access to the records, the law records for lead dispatchers. And we had a discussion about that, be limited to lead dispatchers. I do want to talk with the chiefs group on that because I know previously there was some opposition. I think we have the parameters in place, including the logs and the audits and the controls in place. But I think from my perspective and the committees, there is a business need for it. And I believe that it would be beneficial to our officers out on the street if the dispatchers had some access to records information that would be relevant to officers on the scene. Some real-time information would be beneficial, whether it be a suspect vehicle involved, phone number, what have you. So
That's it?
that is it. Not enough.
We go into discussion.
Oh, yeah. No, that sounds like fun. Sounds like fun.
I'm sure you had enough discussion.
Yeah. I'm assuming Commander Larson, you're already in similar discussions and related to gender identities for the jail record system, or have you already sifted out that?
You know what, my lieutenant is heading that up, so, yeah. I don't know what they've decided in regards to that.
All right, so obviously it's an ongoing discussion,
Yeah.
for sure that affects all of us. All right. So good, unless there are questions for Chief Caters, we'll move on. By the way, I should acknowledge Mayor Sanders is now present, listed among our present. So for those of you at home, I guess Catherine, for your sake, Mayor Sanders is here. I'm sure she's listening. All right, moving on. Item number 3, contracts, services, change orders.
So Central Square has provided us a quote for installing SIM, which is Common Identity Management, into our CAD system. So CAD will affect our CAD logins, the mobile logins, and VisiNet browser logins, tools that the officers use and tools that the dispatchers use. And what this allows, so the same, basically an officer on the street would only have one set of credentials to get in any one of the items, either the RMS system, the mobile system, or the VisiNet browsers. One set of credentials covers all that. It was what we thought was part of the original project. Central Square does not believe it was part of the original project. They are throwing it in on the RMS side because it is a requirement for the NCIC queries. And so they presented us a $37,245 quote with a 50% discount because we will be early adopters to the program. And this goes over my $15,000 cap spending without approval, so I'm bringing it to the committee for discussion.
All right, well, does anybody want to discuss the topic? It would seem to me it's a recommendation that you're making and that it would more fall in the categories or anybody thinking that it's not something that we shouldn't do, or a recommendation we should not be making to the Joint Law Enforcement Council.
Yeah, I believe we should make the recommendation. I talked with Val. We both agree that it's something that should be valuable to everybody.
For the record, Mr. Chair, what is the amount in charge? You said it was half off.
It's $18,622.50 is the current amount.
And then again, for the sake of the record, I saw Val nodding. That means yes, you're agreeing that it's a good expense.
Yes.
Right?
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
No, I'll make the motion. I would also make the comment that it seems like you thought that should have been part of our original contract. It seems like way too much of that happens with these major 8-10 contracts. And we went over, I was in on the beginning, so I know how much we went over it to make sure everything was covered. So it confounds me when something like this isn't, but it's $18,000 on an $8 million contract and a half. So I'll make the motion, Mr. Chair.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Well, second.
Second by Mr. Palumbo. Is there any further discussion on the topic? All right, hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion's adopted.
And procedurally, then, Mr. Chair, it's just a recommendation of joint law to approve the quote.
Yes, that is correct. Just for the record, that's all we ever do is make recommendations to the Joint Law Enforcement Council to adopt. So good.
Mr. Chair, I got to ask the attorney a question here. Anytime we've done live streaming of meetings with remote attendance, we're required to do roll call votes. Is that real or is that perceived by some people?
It is in the law that if there is anybody attending remotely, but I don't know if we have any members attending remotely here.
We do not.
We do not.
No remote.
No
So
voting.
nobody's voting remotely.
Nobody's
So
voting
therefore
remotely.
we can vote in the room by acclamation.
That is correct. Commissioner Schulte, yes.
Very
If
good.
somebody were voting remotely, we would have to do a roll call.
Mr. Chair, is that John Piper over there on that screen?
Yes.
Is he on behalf of the Fire Protection Council joining us? Or?
Yes, Dennis Jones was unable to attend, so he asked me to make a few comments at the time that Fire Protection Council is up.
All right, well, welcome, John.
Thank you.
I didn't see the JP up there, so welcome to the meeting. We'll be happy to hear from the Fire Protection Council for sure. All right, where do we leave off at, George?
We are on number 4, PSDS update, review and question.
All right.
Attachment C is the PSDS update for the governance committee. Highlights of it is there's an audit, internal audit with Anoka County going on against, I believe it's the Joint Law Enforcement Council. So I've participated in questions and provided documentations for that. The fiber project that we started in 2021, January 2021, we agreed to pay for a run of a fiber line between the Anoka County Sheriff's Office and the alternate PSAP out at the radio tower. That project is now complete. It's way under budget. You can find those dollars are in there. And then RT100 and new mobiles, new mobile UI. So the RT100 maps is a project that's been going on for over 3 years. We've had to buy a new server, a more robust server, some costs with that. About 3 years ago, we did that. And now the RT100 maps have finally hit the system. With the last update to the CAD and the mobile software, we are now able to use it. And we have a good project going on. On the law side, it's working flawlessly. It's started being released to the Fridley Police Department. We're not having any issues there, but on the fire side, we have a meeting tomorrow with Central Square to try to figure out what's going on with that. And then also with that last CAD update, we're all allowed to go into the new mobile UI. Right now we started a project to just get the baseline running so we can see what we want, what changes we want to make, even to see if we're even going to go that route. So it doesn't seem like there's a lot of advantage to take it on, but we're going to at least look at it. So right now the plan is to get the baseline up and running, and then once we're happy with the way that's performing, see if our current configurations and customizations from our mobile client can transition into the new UI, and then see what improvements we want to make after that using committees and so forth. So that's pretty much, other than Jason and Britta doing their usual great work with the areas that they're in charge of, things are going really well, I believe.
All right, and then a full copy of all your, as always, you provide a full detailed report with them, which is attached to this right here, PSDS update and review. This is just, you're just going from your script.
Yeah, I'm just going through what the highlights of it, what you can find in there. Just
yeah. What I'm trying to make is that if you have an interest to dig in greater detail at some of the other aspects of the system and the management of the system overall, is that please review the PSDS updates. It's 15 or 20 pages or so, and it follows the same format, I guess, from.
It's 8 pages.
8 pages. Well, it seems like a lot. But it follows the same format to provide update both on things that are new and things that have been going on. So it's a good overview for what we've done.
It's our newsletter.
Yeah, it's our newsletter. That makes perfect sense. All right, so I didn't hear any questions on that topic, so we'll move on to number 5, Emergency Communications Center Val.
So this item was actually covered at data standards. So Chief Cater kind of gave the update. What we had talked about, I wasn't sure which way we were going to go, so we had some discussion back and forth. Decided to bring it up to data standards first, and then vet it to this group. So, and then I'll just give just a quick update. We ran our final numbers count, and we took about 25,000 calls more in 2021 than we took in 20. So we've been busy. We had 5 new dispatchers start Monday. We have 4 more starting February 7th, and then we'll have 3 openings. So plug it away.
And Mr. Chair, what was the total number of calls?
For 21 on the law side was 281,748.
That's 10%. The 10%. Coon Rapids alone had a 10% increase in calls for service.
And our phone calls went up. I mean, we take a lot of phone calls, you know, like if you get an accident, we might get 10 calls for an accident, say. Our phone calls were up to 398,000 phone calls we answered last year.
And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think having at the end of your hiring process only 3 openings is actually pretty good
Amazing.
Compared to where you've been.
Yes.
Yeah.
As long as they all stick it out, you know.
Right.
They started Monday and they all came back. Today's Wednesday. They've been here 3 days, so.
Any key retirements at all that are coming up?
What? Oh, well, Renee left. I think we announced it at the Chiefs lunch.
Yep, he did.
And no, nothing else coming up, hopefully. I mean, Danelle's, you know, been here 40 years, but she's trying to beat Jerry Soma. So.
Okay. Good luck. Is that even possible? How long? I'm just curious on the
52 years.
52,
Yeah.
That's not possible.
No. So she will probably, we're in the process of starting a new building project, so people want to stick around for that.
Okay.
So hopefully we don't have any this year.
All right. So moving on to item number 6. George asked to make a presentation, and he will be doing that shortly, just to provide an overview. And I correct me if I'm wrong, George, if I say something that's a mistake, but there's this international computer vulnerability known as Log4j, right? That was the one. Log4j was over December.
Yes, that was starting the 9th through the end of the December.
Yeah, and there were challenges related to updating systems, and there's multiple systems that were impacted. We have our Psds system and servers, but they affect other things, namely, especially, or in particular, servers that are operated by Anoka County exclusively. And some management concerns popped up. And I'll just say this, for this group, the governance committee, our purpose is to streamline operations and to make recommendations for the Joint Law Enforcement Council. We're a deliberative body. That's what our job is. And so when we find wrinkles or bumps in the road or whatever, we need to identify what those bumps are and then find potential solutions and make recommendations. Generally speaking, in my time here, or the JLEC has existed for almost 50 years, there's no conflict that's insurmountable, including this one. That said, is that we're gonna hear about the issue. We don't need to make any decisions now about anything. What we need to do is figure out a path forward to be successful in the future, so some of the headaches don't happen. Because there were a number of us in the room that experienced migraine headaches on or about Christmas related to Log4j, and nobody needs to experience a headache like that then. And we're just going to sort our way through that. So that said, George wanted to do a statement of what he experienced, I guess is the best way to phrase it. And we don't need to hash out any details about it other than here's what the issue is, and that, because I think we can take things offline. Ms. Vreeland and I have been in a number of discussions lately that have been really good, and it's been nice getting to know you. I appreciate getting the chance to actually talk. And that there's nothing that's insurmountable. So I just want to set that framework out. So George, if you are willing to go ahead here, why don't you provide your overview? I'm not sure, can it be displayed?
I don't have the ability to display it. It was sent out as an attachment in an email earlier today, thanks to Doreen. So it's just a discussion topic. It's labeled for the governance of January 2022 and discussion topic. And really, so the problem statement isn't, that's kind of a military term, but when I gather my staff together and we start working through a problem, we have to have something. What is the statement we're trying to solve? And this really comes down to confusion. And confusion of the Psds management team and the duties and responsibilities concerning Anoka IT position supporting the ECC. I know that's a rough sentence. I'm the first to admit it probably isn't a very well written sentence, but at the end of the day, it's confusion. There's confusion there. And so my intent isn't to draw back on anything. What I want to do is, what I think the best thing to do is, let's review what the public safety data system is, what you built, what this committee built. And by doing that and using facts, the facts that are part of what you built, we'll be able to answer some questions at the end. And we'll discuss those. So at the end, I'll run through the questions again that were part of the agenda. They're not exactly all the same questions, but I changed them a little bit to take some of, to point it towards the position of the Psds management team. And then I'll explain my interpretation of the question, and then we can have a discussion for each one of those questions, if that makes sense. So what is the public safety data system, often referred to as the Psds? It's a fully independent and standalone server network, a private cloud, if you will, that hovers above Anoka County for the public safety resources to take advantage of. It's a criminal justice information system. So there is a document put up by the FBI every year. It's every 2 years, I believe it's updated. And it's It's a 253-page document that governs the management and the use of criminal justice information systems. It's intentionally built independent. This system, the public safety data system, is owned by the JLEC. It was originally built in 2013. It was rebuilt in 2018. And then through the public safety levy, that's in all of our taxes. And then in 2023, we'll go through a rebuild of the equipment and the configurations again to update the equipment so we don't ever have a failure, a major catastrophic failure, and also to take advantage of new technologies. That's why we do that every couple of years. The primary applications for the public safety data systems are the computer-aided dispatch, and that's what Val's crew uses inside the emergency communications center. The mobile applications, that's what's out in the squad cars, and that's what in the fire apparatuses, that's what they use to get the information that the dispatchers are putting in the system. And then from there, it also bleeds out to the records management system. We have one for law and we have one for fire. And then we have this homegrown product that was built in the city of Coon Rapids way back when they were managed in the RMS system for the county. It's called the Anoka County Records Browser. It's kind of a gap filler for us. When we had purchased a product called IQ, that did not meet our needs. And we went back and brought this back from the coffin, I guess. It was dead, but we brought it back. And now we're in version 3.0 of that county records browser. We are looking at building a records browser on the fire side to get some of those functionalities. We had talked at one time, one of the visions of this council and the JLEC was to have some data crossing over between fire and law so they can see what they're walking into, get a picture of what they're walking into. The public safety data system is housed in 2 locations right now. Anoka County Government Center right here in this building in the basement. There's a great big beautiful data center down there. We own 2 closets or cabinets down there. That's the primary location. The secondary location's over at the sheriff's office. And what you need to know, that's with that is the data that's entered in the primary location is updated at the secondary location within a blink of an eye. So if an officer's writing a citation on the field, within a second, that data is in that secondary, and that's our disaster recovery. If something happens here where the system isn't reachable here, it's a flick of a switch, and the secondary becomes the primary with very minimal data loss. And that's what Logis had designed for us back in 2018 when we went live with that. We pay for internet and fiber. It's about $3,600 a year we pay for internet and fiber use from the county. And we are our partners. We talked a little bit about a fiber project we just finished. We purchased a drop of a line between the sheriff's office and that our alternate PSAP. We've also done a project to improve the redundancy of that line over the years, which makes it so that if there's a cut in that line anywhere in the fiber optic ring, the data doesn't get lost. It just backs up and goes the other direction. It gets to all the sources that it needs to get to. So when you have this cloud above, everybody's got to have a way of getting into that, or a way of accessing those resources. And so the next on the connections page in that attachment, you'll see I created a little figure. It was like 3 in the morning when I created it, so they are kind of goofy. I realize that. But the one at the top represents the ECC. The green, the one in the middle, that leafy looking one, is the public safety data system. And then you have the agencies, the normal, so the fire and the police agencies out there. And each of those figures represents equipment. It represents the servers, the switches, everything that's organic to their environment, whatever that might be. Their software, and their IT. So everybody's got their own environment. And what the public safety data system does is opens up a method of connecting into the resources of it. So in the ECC, for example, they have all their equipment inside their bubble. And then there's a switch down in the closet that allows one of their computers to plug into the resources of the public safety data system. Out at the agency, for example, they have a firewall around their environment. And what we do there is their IT gets together with our IT and we build a tunnel. It's an encrypted tunnel that allows communication, two-way communication between their environment and our environment. If you look at the figure there, you'll see a white line that clearly separates. Those are the fences. There's not a lot of crossover between those connection points. So there are clear boundaries between them. The VPN access is primarily used for vendors and for my team. The VPN access is used by Central Square, for example, to come in and do the updates or add patches to any part of the system. Logis uses a VPN connection to come in and do their part of the system. They are a network services provider. And so the VPN is something, one thing about that VPN access is nobody enters into the green zone, if you will, that leafy green object without us knowing about it, without one of my team members knowing about it, without one of my team members knowing about it. So, for example, tomorrow there's going to be some updates happening on a switch at the government center, the two primary switches. That's going to go on, and we just got done talking about it today in our meeting. We talked about, okay, what's the timing of this? What's it going to impact? And we all agree that, yeah, okay, it's good for Logis to come in and do that. We know at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock tomorrow, they're going to go in there and do that work. The VPN is also, we use it to get in. So I'm in there when I'm inside the system, for whatever reason I'm in there. I use the VPN to get in there because it's most convenient for me. A VPN connection has dual two-factor. So, and that means there's usually some kind of a code or some kind of reaction that the user has to do and we have set up that says, yep, they're the right person that's entering in the system. Other than that, in the case of the ECC, they have the CAD admin position signed directly to Val, and that person, that member is a part of the Psds management team. So they have direct access into that green zone. But like the agency in the lower, the agencies out there, none of those people have access to that green area. If they want to come in through that into the Psds environment, it's usually provided through escort access. It's the same thing that LexisNexis does. We talked about LexisNexis. If they need to come on and change something for their data pool, I provide them escorted access into the system, and that's to protect the system. It's the same thing for Pulse Point. They come in and they make changes. So one of the team members will escort those people in. So that's how we connect and take advantage of those resources. The PSCS has a budget, and we talked a little bit about that earlier today, earlier in the meeting. The budget is established to manage, maintain, protect, and improve the public safety data system. It's 1.6 million plus for 2022, and it provides all the known needs for this system. And it also provides a fund to where we have an undiscovered need, we can pay for that. And we talked a little bit about that with the CAD, with that SIM today. So we can draw, we're pretty much self-sustaining through this budget. It also, you can see it covers our license to support maintenance for all applications, interfaces, software. Even the jail PCI is covered in that software maintenance. System management, that's Britta, Jason, myself, that's included in that. And then that network services with Logis. And pretty much everybody is contracted. There's a contract somewhere in there that's defining what the role is or what the purpose is to the system. All JLEC members pay their share based on the super formula. You heard Corey mention that. But for the PSDS management team, we provide 100% even access. If somebody needs something, we're there to provide that. And I think we've proven that over the years. So when we talk about the system manager, what's most applicable to what we're talking about today is the PSDS manager position. It's hosted through a City of Fridley contract with the Joint Law Enforcement Council. So Director Brian Werke, the Public Safety Director for the City of Fridley, he is my direct boss when it comes to personnel matters. On the PSDS side, currently it's Brad Weiss, the chair of this committee, is my direct boss. So I bounce ideas off of him and we work on how we're going to approach things from that aspect. Exhibit A to that, and that contract included after all the questions in this PowerPoint, it included that as part of a part of that package. Exhibit A of that contract has 4 items that are relevant to some of the confusion that we've had. And it's relevant because these are my guiding, this is what have guided me through this last month. Every action that I've taken is because I understand it to be my responsibility. And so the first one clearly states the system manager responsible for the overall operation of an integrated public safety data system. Down below, you see bolded and highlighted, computer-aided dispatch, mobile devices, records, systems. You can finish the sentence. Notice I didn't highlight the yellow. I didn't highlight in yellow the computer-aided dispatch. There is an agreement other than this that says that Val and her team manage the software, which fits into the model. So they manage that whole part of the system. The software, the configuration, all that happens. And that happens in their bubble, inside their equipment on their PCs. So that switch is kind of still the defining line between their system and our system. It says here, you can read it, coordinate network administrative and support activities through contracts for service or direct and report employees. You can read it, maintain PST compliance with all applicable laws and regulations. That's the BCA, CGIS information. That's what we have to maintain the system to. And then we report status. That's a primary duty. It's one of the first ones mentioned. Primary duty is report status. So that's what the PSDS managers contracted to do with the JLEC. We go into the network services. It's the same thing with network services. We have a contract with a company called, or an organization called LOGIS, or Local Government Information System. So this would be on the next slide. And that's a consortium of 66 entities from all over Minnesota. And it's not always public safety, it's also public admin that they manage. It's all inclusive. We take advantage of all their network services. And you can see the list, it's gigantic. They have, and if you went up on their website, you would see this is exactly what they provide us. So the 2 things I want to point out is the backups. That's a major expense to the Joint Law Enforcement Council. It costs us $50,000 a year. And I mentioned that earlier, that we were able, because we have such good backups, we were able to cut a huge chunk out of our support and maintenance contract because of the good work, because of their good design. We were able to save about almost $20,000 because of what this team provides us. The other bullet point is the maintains the system to CGIS standards. They are an expert when it comes to maintaining systems to the standard, whatever that standard might be. And they have proven that time in, time out for us. But it's more than contracted service with them. You know, Brad sits as, Chief Weiss sits as a chair member, a board member on their board. We take advantage of their purchasing power because they're taking care of they buy so much equipment that usually it's about a 40% savings when we work with LOGIS buying equipment. And right now, there's not a piece of equipment that I would even consider buying without talking to LOGIS first, just because of the buying power. And it's software too. If there's services out there that we require, they can usually provide us a pretty good deal through their contacts. And one more step, it's a partnership. They own the same Central Square products we do. They're looking at a version of the Anoka County records browser that's out there for sale or for purchase. And it's the same, they run the same products, and there's a knowledge share between us. Chris Olson, former chair of this committee, and we talk monthly. And we talk about Central Square, the problems we're having with the software, and ways that we can kind of help push Central Square the direction we want us to go. So it's hard, we'd be hard pressed to find another company that does this as well as LOGIS does, in my opinion. So all of this adds up to all these things that we have built ends up to the team that I have helped manage the system. Again, everything that we do is we have contracts for, except for in 2 positions. So if you look at this, the PSDS management team, that includes me. I'm a working member of the team. I am the manager of this whole thing, but I am a working member of the team. I work with the browser specifically, that records browser. I'm the DBA. I'm a I'm a DBA for the entire system. I run queries, I help set up security and all that stuff in the databases. I am the backup. I do a lot of reporting in this system. Chief Antoine and I have been talking about providing his agency a bunch of reports over the last couple of months that they were lacking in. So I do a lot of that reporting, but I'm a backup to all functional areas. Britta goes on vacation, Jason goes on vacation, I cover down in their areas. It's the same thing with Kevin. Kevin went up north. He likes to go up on those excursions way into the boundary waters, and generally I'm the backup there. Sometimes maybe it hasn't been, but for the most part, I know the last time he went up, I was the backup. We have mobile admin, Sergeant Andy Todd. There's one that he's not contracted to the JLEC at all, but his organization is a member, and he has been here just like Kevin has been since the very beginning. He is an expert for mobile all over the county. All the county agencies contact him. And if they're having problems with their mobiles, or they're having problems with radio systems or whatever, he is one of the experts that they call upon. Jason Ihart also, he was working on that on the fire side. And so, and then you see Logis, we have Scott Crocker, he's specifically named to our team. So if we have an issue or we want to do something, Scott's the first person that we call. I can tell you we're flatly organized, meaning there's no hierarchy inside our team. We all bring our talents to the table. We share each other's challenges. We try to provide different ideas to help get through those challenges. And then all the admins that are assigned to this team do have full access to this system. And so that's the Psds from my perspective, what I've been working with for the last 6.5 years. So now we can go into the questions. The next one's a question. So based on that information, the question comes up, who sets user level privileges inside the Psds? And so when I look at that leafy green emblem in the middle of the page there, that's what we're talking about. Who gets to go into the workings of the Psds management team? And like I said, generally only contracted people get to go into that part of it. And none of the agencies do. If they do, they work with a team member to get what they need out of it. And then most contractors, they have to go through escort access into the system. So when I see this, I believe it's the public safety data system manager that sets those user level privileges. And I would open it up for discussion at that point.
All right, thank you, George. And actually, I'll say this, is that over time, exactly what the public safety data system is and where its boundaries are isn't really something we spent a lot of time discussing, really. It was, for those of you who weren't around in the beginning, like Scott, I and Tony, and Jeff Gators were, it was a lot of flinging spaghetti at the wall and seeing how to cobble all this together. And I think I'm correct in that system vulnerability and how it impacted county systems, I guess, exposed an area that we never really discussed. And it reminds me, I guess, of you making that comment about the contract, Scott, where you thought you covered everything, but in the end, you really didn't. And so now this came down, I guess this approaches the conversation about system access for maintenance. And I guess I don't know how to proceed other than I know that the county had an experience, I guess we'll call it a negative experience. And Scott, I don't know if you were prepared to talk about it or if you wanted to talk about it, but you can talk about the experience and cause and effect. And then again, I'm going to highlight the idea we're shining a light on an issue to be resolved. We're not shining a light on a death sentence here. So, all right.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just say that probably first and foremost, that what needs to be understood, I mean, CAD admin is listed as Kevin McNallen here. Kevin McNallen is an Anoka County IT employee formerly. He's no longer with IT in Anoka County. He took a new job. He signed up for a new job. He took that job. He's no longer with our IT department. We have a replacement for him that we work really hard with. Somebody very talented with a great resume, worked with 911 centers all over the place, sharp guy, his name is Song. And he has replaced Kevin in that role. So it is our assertion actually, it's our assertion that anything Kevin had access to, Song should now have access to, because he replaced Kevin. Kevin continues to work in our ECC, in our 911 center, but he's firewalled. It's a brick wall between what he used to do and what he does now. So it's our contention or assertion that Song should have those access rights. And it came about with the Apache Log4j, Log4j issue, because there's so much interfacing between our servers. Even though the Psds is a cloud up here, it interfaces with Anoka County all over the place. And because of that, we needed access to make sure that there wasn't something in the directories on the Psds that could infect our system. Am I saying any of that right?
Correct.
But that's what we needed. And so it was a simple request. Song needs that access. And it wasn't granted. It was denied, and we worked hard to get it granted. Now I hear it's denied again. He's no longer has access. It's unacceptable. He's our employee who's dedicated to this system, and yet he doesn't have access. It's a problem for us. It's a big problem. I know it's solvable. The chief tells me it's solvable, and I've always believed him. No reason to question me now.
Thanks.
Can I ask what is Kevin's role in the ECC?
So when he transferred over to us, the rules kind of were that he was not to touch anything that was on the servers.
Well, let me just rephrase it. His job assignment doesn't include server management.
Correct.
Is that the way? So his job
So
duties are something
he's
else.
more CAD, CAD, keeping that up and running, response plans, that kind of thing. The day-to-day operations.
Would it be safe to say he is the CAD admin?
Yes.
Okay, and so the whole here is for sure there was never any agreement between Joint Law Enforcement Council and Anoka County on what the role of Kevin McNallen was. Kevin was involved in this system for a long time. He predates George. He filled that role for a number of years, and so it was one of the issues it just never even came to our minds to discuss what role is because George's team is sitting right here under contract, a joint law enforcement contract. That's the team. Those three members have defined roles and are part of that contract and are, for lack of a better word, employees of the JLEC. I'm sloppy with the term, but you get what I mean. They're contracted to work for the JLEC, and it was just there was never a consideration on what role we just never, I don't know, you were there. Kevin's not going anywhere. There's Kevin.
Well,
It's just
clearly,
Kevin.
Mr. Chair, clearly Anoka County brings a ton of resources to the table that we're never compensated for.
Yeah.
And we're okay with that. We're a part of the team. We're part of the organization. We're part of the partnership. We're 65+% of the financial partnership. But over and above that, we bring the finance guy, Corey. He's never been charged, a penny of his time has never been charged to JLEC. A number of people that are involved are never, you're not built for that. And that's fine. We're a part of the team. We want to be a part of the team. But we brought along a guy's Song to replace Kevin McNallen. And he needed access to make sure that this bug wasn't going to get into our system. And it wasn't granted. So we want Song to have that access.
Yeah, and so correct me if I'm wrong, we're talking about agreement. So it seems to me it feels like an agreement needs to be in place for the position of, I don't know, what title would you give Song as it relates to does he do more than just CAD? He does more than just CAD.
Yeah. So Mr. Chair, members of the committee, if I can elaborate a little bit. So when Kevin was hired back in late 2013, he was hired for a couple of things. One specifically from a different role in IT for this job, which is the back end of CAD administration, based on what the vendor communicated the county would need to bring to the table because of the size of the technology. So we created this role. We have it in IT supporting other departments, but it was to administer the back end server level technology of specific to CAD, along with any other technology that they needed that back end support for. Two predecessors prior to Val, there was a director in the EC area that did a lot of the hands-on technology work. When that was passed on to Val's predecessor, it became apparent that they had a day job to do, right? They didn't have time for that. And so this person came in, Kevin, one for this piece and two for supporting their other back-end technologies. And it's called a system project leader role. We have one for the attorney's office, we have one for the sheriff's office, we have one in a number of areas, and they do that back end work, which in most organizations, according to best practices, is segregated from the hands-on work that we have a department do. Just like our financial group doesn't have departments deposit their own checks, that level of work is done centrally for the county. When it was recognized that 911's technology had grown even more and was becoming even more of a job for just more than one person, we looked at creating a position known as a technical analyst. That position is typically housed in departments. They deal with more of the front end technology. We also have that role in a number of areas in the county. And so we found a way to post and publish that position in partnership. Kevin has always had, I think not just professionally, but personally, a need to be involved in the public safety field. And so this felt like a natural opportunity for him, not just to support Val's technology needs, but I also think for his career growth, he saw an opportunity there. And so he moved into the EC area, and we worked for several months to post and hire his replacement. In the interim, with the understanding we'd be continuing that relationship and support of emergency communications, we took 2 staff out of rotation, hired them as backups to be trained under Kevin's leadership, so that while I looked to find that position, we would always have someone in place that could help with that support. That person is in place now and is ready to play that role, but he needs that access to do his job. And quite frankly, so we don't find ourselves in a position if he needs to get in there to do something that he cannot do.
All right, and so that in that position has a title, a name that we can, because it seems to me we need an agreement. All of us are not going to be in this room at some point. Some year, none of us are going to be here. And other people need to have an agreement in place that they can, a roadmap to follow. And it seems to me that we have an obligation, given this absence of clarity, to provide a roadmap.
Mr. Chair, if I wouldn't mind, so back end support. So yes, I agree. At the beginning, this was a position that there needed to be somebody out there configuring, helping configure servers. But so over the years, that turned into the CAD admin. And when we look at back end support, all we're talking about is, seriously, all we're talking about is now and then Kevin goes in and there's an issue with the system. He goes to the server that has that issue. He checks to make sure services are working. He may, based on, he may have to reboot that server. But generally, at the point in time where we find something that we cannot affect, any of us, what we do is we call on the professionals. So that's network, that's our network services group, Logis, because they built this system. They understand the ins and outs of it. I'm sorry, Song doesn't. Song does not.
You don't know.
Well, no, stop. No, we're not gonna devolve in this. Because it doesn't matter, Song could retire or tomorrow and be gone, and we're talking about a different cast of characters. There's no point in having that discussion. So let's again, so go and talk about that role, the role, not the person.
That's fine. What I do know is Song was just hired. He does not know the system. I can tell you that for sure.
Mr. Chair, just repeated what you told him not to.
All right, just talk.
But I do know it.
Talk about the position. Talk about the position, please, George.
The position of CAD admin is exactly that, keeping it up and running. And every now and then you got to go into a server level deal. And the servers are inside the public safety data system. And that's where those roles come into play. The role or the user level service that someone needs has to be evaluated. It has to be evaluated based on what their need is and what the experience of the person that's going in there, and what it is they are going to do at the end of the day. So when you look at user level privileges, and we have somebody who shows up to the team I've never been introduced to before, I don't know what their role is. I do not understand the role. How can you set the privileges for that person to access the system? It can't be just because you want it. There has to be a legitimate need. I want to continue on with Log4j. Log4j started on the 9th of December. By mid-morning of December 10th, we had already secured our system. On December 14th, we did a scan. We found out where our servers were stood on that. And this is a vulnerability, so it can't spread. It's not something that can spread from one server to another. It has to be installed. And so on the 14th, we identified where it was installed on our system. On the 15th, we wiped all those instances out. using our contracted vendors. 16th, we reported, I think that was on the 16th that we were able to complete that work. So we have that's under control. We had it under control from the very beginning. So when Anoka, when we're saying, so Song could come in and do a check in this system that he has really no idea the mapping of it, where would he look? How would he do it? What tools are you going to use to scan the system to find the vulnerability? That's what interests me. None of that is in place or accessible to Song at this time, or that position at this time. That's my point. So all we had to do is ask for a status, and I would have been able to provide that status.
All right, well, I understand your point, George. I understand your point. And you're advocating on behalf of the Joint Law Enforcement Council, and I get that, and that role is important. I still don't see why we would be unable to reach an agreement where the Joint Law Enforcement Council would, as an entity, would ask that this role meets certain qualifications, that the county would agree, we'll provide a person with those qualifications to do X activity. That I can't foresee why this can't be an agreement that would last beyond my time, beyond your time, beyond Song's time, or whatever. There's an agreement, because that role is not going to go away, seems, as long as Anoka County has central communications with software systems that integrate with our software systems. The need is always going to be there, if I'm not mistaken. We can define that, and this meeting isn't the right place to define that. This meeting, in the end, might be, or this group might be the right place, well, in fact, will be the right place to have a tentative agreement that might be workable for both sides, that then winds up being a recommendation to the Joint Law Enforcement Council, and then winds up in front of the county board for their approval for agreement. Is there anything that I said just now that seems wrong, process-wise? Anybody?
Makes sense to me, Mr. Chair.
So we're gonna go forward on that basis. So I think I understand enough of the problem, but I think we can take it offline. I understand you have an immediate need. Is that right? That's not the purview of this group. We're an advisory body. We don't make decisions here. So we're gonna move on from this topic.
Mr. Chair, Song does have access to the system. He has access to CAD production-related servers, and that's clearly defined in the email sent to Susan.
Okay.
It's clearly defined that he has access to about 12 servers that are production.
Yeah, that's not productive to this level of conversation for this group. We have to confine this conversation in the governance committee to actual governance, not what issue is taking place on a day-to-day basis, because that's what managers are for. All right. Is there anybody else that wants to weigh in on this discussion? Yes.
Mr. Chair, just maybe a clarifying question. The access that's being requested is different than other entities, is that right? I mean, okay. So like, is this an access that like our IT staff would need in the city of Ramsey?
No.
Okay.
Yours IT would get escorted access to it. Okay. Because they don't understand this system.
Okay. And just for clarity, this has to do with CAD systems, right? I mean, it's like an integration between CAD systems.
Yes.
Okay. So it's a unique, it's different.
And not just specific to CAD, Mr. Chair, if I may, it's to all of their technologies. So is there work there for CAD? Absolutely, but they work with other technologies that may not necessarily impact the public safety data system, but are just as critical to support. And so this role would do that as well, just as Kevin had in the past.
Such as Active 911.
So is it a two-way communication between the systems, or is it a one? Is it just exporting data, or is it sharing data?
It'd be sharing, excuse me, sharing.
Sharing data with county systems. That answers.
All right, good. All right, that was a lively discussion. I like it. All right, if we're done with the discussion, we're gonna move on to the next topic then. Well, the resolution is that we're gonna take this offline to discuss an agreement, whatever the county needs. We'll discuss, they'll make a request in terms of an agreement, and then that would be presented to the Joint Law Enforcement Council to proceed with an agreement.
Does the chair have a suggested process for drawing up that kind of agreement?
Well, I think I need to have a better understanding of what an agreement like that would look like. I think to me, it's up to step one would be for the county to write what it is that you need. What do you need and why you need it? And I guess if there's something in writing that would be related to that, would be a great place to start. And we'll just go from there.
That sounds acceptable to me. One working document we could start with. I know that Kevin spent some time with his peers in IT before he left and with Song to really define what are those segregation of duties, what does Song need to get to what he needs to get to, and maybe that could be the baseline for an agreement, but at least it lays out very specifically what those technologies are.
Yeah, and I want to stress the idea that we're going to try to avoid it. It's not the character, it's the position. We got to define what that position is within Anoka County. Because any one of us can get by a bus on the way out of here. I don't wish to overload, you know.
Mr. Chair, we clearly have titles for these positions.
All right, good.
Susan would be more than happy to share those in the document.
Good,
Absolutely.
good. And then we can just discuss qualifications and training that might be useful, those sorts of things. We can vet all that out in an agreement.
The only historical aspect I'll add, Mr. Chair, is that when this thing first started, everybody was just hands-on to try and fix whatever they could to get it done. I mean, there were we didn't have any idea, you know, this was before George came on, before we had anybody. I mean, we were trying to get this system to work, so anybody that had any expertise to come in and helped. And you're right, we didn't actually sit down and design a system.
Or the management of the
Or
system.
the management of the system. We didn't, because everybody was just doing their best to get it done, you know. And now we've reached a point, I think our growth is such, and, you know, there's valid points being raised around this table. But I think we need to address it, and we have to have a system, or management of a system in place as to what's going on. So there can be expectations by George, and expectations certainly by our IT and by the ECC.
Yeah, and so I would just say in future meetings, just expect some sort of agreement takes shape. That would be coming back to this group for an adoption or making a recommendation to the joint office council, and that we can get a written agreement in place. The immediate needs, we're going to have to address one-on-one, but we can do that. Ms. Breland and I already have a working relationship that we can make things happen, or you two, Dee. I'm not sure where your role is going to fit in with all this, but
Right, I'm kind of between the two, but I was gonna say, you know, there is a necessity and a need for this, and so the timeline, but I think we can work offline to figure out what that will be.
Yeah.
But I think, like, you go back to, it all goes down to roles, and before he was a system lead, you know, luckily enough, we were able to keep Kevin by moving him into a TA position with 911. He's really happy there. We're trying to make him kind of into a management, another level there. And we still now have this system lead that Song has gone into, and figuring out, we had to work through what the system analyst lead would do and what the TA lead would do before we even moved Kevin. So we knew where there was a clear line. And so we do have a document that I think would be really helpful for that.
all right. Sounds good. All right, let's move on then.
Perfect.
Chief Piper, you had a more entertaining meeting than normal. Are you still there?
Yes, I just wish I would have attended in person.
All right, item number 7, Fire Protection Council update. And one thing I'll ask you to provide updates, John, because I forget every year what your timeline, what you need in terms of a budget figure to bring back to your Fire Protection Council. Your timeline is always different than the law one. So if you can speak to that at some point, that would be great.
I could speak to that right away. Basically, we moved it out a month for to get a little bit more accurate numbers. So what we're going to do is at our meeting coming up here, I believe it's the 27th at the end of this month, we'll be presenting the new budget, and then it doesn't get voted on until April. So basically, instead of approving it in January, it'll get approved in April. So that's kind of where we're at on that issue.
Okay.
Let's see, and then Dennis gave me a couple other quick things, and you can tell me if there's anything else you need at the end, but he just asked me he was unable to attend today. That's why I'm here for you. Basically, the other things he mentioned here in addition to the budget is the box alarms completed the county-wide fire response, and now they're moving to hazmat, tech rescue, grass fires, and train issues. Their meeting moved from monthly to quarterly, so they're pursuing that. Radio policies, working on some stuff. A couple of things that that I added to the list is the Fire Academy has been run in-house by the various fire departments and personnel throughout the county. That's going away. It's going to be outsourced. Currently, Chief Zickman from Fridley is taking the lead on reviewing 3 different proposals, so who's going to take that over? So we're going to see where it's going to go, but there's going to be a big change there. And the last thing I wrote down is currently the Specialized Rescue Team and the Fire Investigation Team are not legally under the Fire Protection Council. So Chief Thompson down in Heights is working with our attorney to come up with whatever language is necessary, so they come underneath the umbrella of the Fire Protection Council. So really, that's very brief, but I wanted to be brief. You've probably been at about an hour and 38 minutes, it looks like, and I don't want to hold you up, but if you have any questions, I'll try to answer them.
All right, thank you, Chief. Anybody have any questions for Chief Piper? That sounds like we're good. Thanks, John.
Yep, thank you.
All right, so on to upcoming meetings. Looks like we have a joint law enforcement council meeting January 26th at Anoka. And I heard there was some conversation about WebEx type, how we were going to pull that off because we're going to go back to the virtual in-person option. Is that right? Sounds for JLEC. Yeah.
That's correct, Mr. Chair. Some members obviously of the JLEC that want to attend virtually. And they do that as Scott Schulte commented earlier, we then have to live stream it, and then we're working through those issues with the PD.
All right. Good. And then we need to set our next governance committee meeting date. And actually, I neglected to look at my calendar. You don't have one.
Well, the April JLEC meeting hasn't been set yet, but if we go by the rules of procedure, it would be the April 27th, and governance would be April 13th, which is 2 weeks prior to that.
Okay, I know, like in years past, it would butt up against the Chiefs conference, but I don't know that I even know the Chiefs conference schedule because that moved because of COVID also.
Yeah, and that was always the issue, Mr. Chair. We didn't know when to set that meeting because of the Chiefs conference. So,
I don't know, I think I'd be okay with setting the tentative date of the 13th at 2 o'clock, and unless something comes up that would ruin that.
can always move that if you need to.
All right, so the next governance committee then April 13th at 2 p.m.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Just a reminder for everybody, if you do decide to WebEx into any of these meetings that are going to be live streamed, you also have to disclose ahead of time to the secretary your address where you'll be viewing the meeting and make sure it's open to the public during that time so the public can join you wherever you're at. Yeah,
and actually that was an informal conversation earlier that some people who work around event, hotel lobbies or things like that, if that's what we need to do, they want to become okay sort of thing. So I don't know, Tony, did you want to address my retirement yet, or that? I mean, in the end, it'll be the Joint Law Enforcement Council to appoint a replacement to the chair.
Mr. Chair, I'm assuming you're going to be around through April, are you?
Yeah, good.
It's much fun. Under our bylaws, what happens is I appoint the committee members, and then the committees then appoint a chair. So that's how we structure it. So at this point, I'm certainly willing to listen to anybody that wants to be chair of this committee beginning in July. So if you want to, please let me know. I'd be happy to do it.
All right, beautiful. All right, so if there's anything else for the good of the group? No, all right, if not, I think we'll be adjourned then.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.